Hi, I'm Dave Cut, and you're watching another Comic Chat. What's up, guys? Back again today with another fun comic with the story of Hellverine. And this is a 4-part series, so we're starting off with part 1. And this story starts off in Hell with Mephisto. And Mephisto has many servants, many worshipful humans, possessed animals, corrupted shadows, cursed objects. But among his favorites is the demon known as Bagra Ghul. And Bagra Ghul has erected monumentus of suffering in his honor, both in the halls of hell and in the world above. He first found a vessel in a child, conceived on a blood altar. His name was Bram Straub, and Bram reluctantly did the work prescribed of him for many years, until he caught notice of Project Hellfire, where there was a deal struck. Because they wanted Bagra Ghul as a weapon, and Bram honestly just wanted to be free of this possession. So they found a new host, and then Logan, the man known as Wolverine, the Hellverine, was born. The ultimate killing machine. Spirit of Vengeance was the only one capable of stopping him. Spirit of Vengeance, aka Johnny Blaze or Ghost Rider, was the only one who could stop him. The demon was stealed away in a moment, marking its own apparent demise. But in fact, Bagra Ghul has been healing, hibernating, waiting to return, afoot in two worlds, and now it is ready to rise again, as we see something exploding from the earth. As we flash to 1 month ago, in the far north on the shore of the Hudson Bay, at the container ship docks, it comes from across the Atlantic, and it carries a different sort of commercial load. The people agreed to be stowed away, hoping for a better life awaited them. But they have been sold into slavery. Those who survive have been transported from here to basements and clubs and massage parlors, except that something finds them first. As you can see, fire approaching them in the mirror. And then we cut to 3 weeks ago in upstate New York. There is a small church there struggling to survive. So the priest decides to do something about it. And during Mass, he laces the communion wine with drugs, creating dependency and wild, ecstatic visions that bring more worshippers every week. Several have died, but several more have taken their place. And now the priest's time for confession has come. So we can see hellfire in his glasses. Because Bagra Ghul has risen once more. The Hellverine walks among us. But something is different this time. Resurrection brings change. As we flash back to Arlington National Cemetery just 2 days ago, it's pouring down rain and there are 5 graves laid out. They were part of an elite fire team. Extensively trained, highly decorated. There was no unit more dangerous or effective in the army. But an ambush put an end to all but one of them. And now their families and their nations mourn. We see the funeral ending and everyone starting to leave as one of the soldiers says, "The cemetery is cleared, General Harms." And General telling everyone, "All right, it's time to dig them up." As we come to somewhere in Virginia, present day, we can see Logan standing in a bar, and they say, "He was easy to find if you knew where to look. Roadside bars that smelled like stale beer and the ghosts of 1,000 cigarettes. Ideally with sawdust and peanut shells on the floor for soaping up the blood." The bartender didn't ask if he could help the visitors. They were clearly here on business, as we see men approach Logan and him saying, "Whoever you are, you smell like gun oil and sulfur," before attacking. You can see that at the Washington, D.C., at the Pentagon just yesterday. Deep below is a new facility called the Pentangle, and this is the home of Project Hellfire. We could see General Harms walking in, asking the Dr. Spivey if they were ready, and her telling them that they're not even close, they're still running diagnostics. And here we can see why they're so far behind, as Dr. Spivey tells them they don't know much about the Hellfire energy. But he reassures her, telling her that each one of those soldiers costs $60 million. And they're not just going to write this off, and that they better get their bodies prepped as fast as you can break down a rifle and clean it. This lab is devoted to the arsenal of hell. Iron forged with the blood of sinners. Weapons charged with the screams of the damned. Sulfurous bombs burning chains, poisoned hooks that cause torturous pain, pain, right down to the marrow of one's soul. Hellfire is a weapon, as we can see the doctor hooking up the 5 bodies that they dug up to a machine. And as General Harms throws the switch down, the machine turns on, and the 5 bodies light up with hellfire. Then we cut back to today in Virginia, where we can see Logan taking on the soldiers, but they knock him out with tranq darts with what they say is twice as much as it takes to take down a polar bear. You can see Dr. Spivey saying restrain him before his healing factor kicks in, and he wakes up. As we cut back to yesterday at Project Hellfire, we can see what happens after General Harms had thrown down the switch and activated the machine. Dr. Spivey is a little worried, but General Harms reassures her, telling her that the building is completely locked down and that they will fall in line. We can see them starting to wake, and General Harms yelling at them, telling them that he's their new commanding officer and he orders them to stand down. But they seemingly don't listen, as one grabs a scientist close to him and immediately burns his face to ashes and says, "Dead. Dead is better," before killing himself and stabbing himself in his own eye. We can see the other 4 gaping, as General Harms is just left standing there saying, "Stop them." But no one's really stopping these guys, as you can see them tearing up the lab as Dr. Spivey and General Harms run away. We can see the other 4 making it to the surface and killing everyone along their way before they escape themselves. And we flash back to 4 days ago outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where we can see a giant mansion and a bunch of people gathering for dinner. They say some of the servants of hell have a sense beyond smell or sight of touch. They hear the sound of sin. They taste the evil in the air. Such is the case with Bagra Ghul. The demon knows darkness, the way a compass knows north. As we can see, these people were actually here to eat someone else. We can see Hellverine crashing in through the window on a flaming motorcycle. They say he was hungry too. That this supper club had been meeting once a month for over a decade. They only ate what they hunted. And what they hunted was the poor and the vulnerable population, the ones that no one would ever miss. Now it was their turn to be hunted. As we see Hellverine outside on his motorcycle as the mansion burns down, we can see that he had killed everybody at that party and strung them together and put them up on the chandelier. They say something had to happen when Bagra Ghul bound itself together with Wolverine, a twining, a warping. Logan was scared through his center with regret for all the terrible things he had done, but he weaponized that guilt. And when Logan lashed out now, he did so with a repentant spirit. And in the same fashion, Bagra Ghul could still bathe in blood and wallow in entrails and delight in pain, while punishing the punishers. Punishers like the ones he sensed now, their darkness stacked up on the horizon like a bank of terrible thunderclouds, as we see Hellverine riding off. We cut back to today, where Logan is waking up in a dark room, and we can see General Harms questioning him. "Why didn't you use your powers?" And Logan popping the claws and says, "I got your powers right here." But Harms is telling him, "I'm not talking about your little claws. I'm talking about your hellfire power, like you did 4 weeks ago." But as General Harms is showing him all these killings and everything that Hellverine's been doing, Logan tells him that's not him. But General Harms tells him, "You're talking to the new head of the Project Hellfire. They created the Hellverine. They implanted that demonic spirit in him. They know who Logan is." But Logan just headbutts General Harms, telling him, "You guys aren't listening. That shit got ripped out of him by the Ghostwriter long ago." But none of it made sense, that the Bagra Ghul guy is the bad guy. He doesn't go out hunting the bad guys. But General Harms just wants to know, if it's not Logan, then who's this new Hellverine? And as helicopters show up and start firing down upon Hellverine and the destroyers, one of the destroyers launches chains up, grabs one of the helicopters, and throws it down right over Hellverine. As it explodes, you can see General Harm showing Logan the next day what had happened, telling him that they had killed 50 people in the span of just an hour, that their firepower had no impact, but the Hellverine sure did, and that he needed to fight fire with fire, and asking Logan if he would help him. And Logan agrees, telling him to pull up that footage again the moment when the Hellverine got blasted by those choppers, because he can sniff and see better than most. And as they watch the video and slow it down, we can see Logan saying, "Almost there, right there, it can't be." Before General Harms asks, "What, did you see something?" We cut back to somewhere in Maryland, and Logan saying something that wouldn't mean anything to you. Too small on the screen, but something I'd recognize anywhere. A tattoo. As we can see who the Hellverine actually is. Logan saying, "That's my son. That's Akihiro." But it's impossible, because he's dead. That's all for the first book, as we can see a little bit of a recap. We see Wolverine and Ghost Rider encountered a demon called Bagra Ghul, who had possessed a young boy, using his body as a vessel to transform into hellfire-fueled monster that would kill innocents and stitch them into horrific works of art. Logan and Blaze defeated Bagra Ghul, but not before it possessed Wolverine, transforming him into Hellverine. Wolverine was able to reject the demon and lock it away, but Bagra Ghul is free, and thus rises the Hellverine Ressurection. This story starts out in the past at the North Pole, where we can see Akihiro fighting Sabretooth. And I actually covered this in the Sabretooth Wars, Part 1. So if you guys want to go check that out. But here we see some called him Daken, others called him Fang, but his name was Akihiro, and he was the son of Logan. Because of this, because the blood of Wolverine ran through his veins, he was not only hunted and killed by Sabretooth, but his body was defiled and torn asunder. Sometimes hell isn't a place, but a feeling. He died in a dark, cold place, and he was buried in a dark, cold place. The stones and horns kept the bears and the wolves from digging him up, but they could not stop Bagra Ghul. The demon sensed Akihiro lying in wait, an empty, willing vessel that matched what the demon recognized as an analog to the Wolverine, who had previously been its reluctant host. Akihiro's body was broken, but preserved as though in blue amber, a cryogenic preservation that allowed for demonic resurrection. So we can see Bagra Ghul crash down into the earth where he was being buried. Bagra Ghul was known by some as the Stitcher for the way it sewed together its unholy monuments. It unpuzzled the ruin of Akihiro's body and built him back together. Together, in this new hybrid form, they are the Hellverine, a fiery killing instrument that is compelled to punish evil. So we see Akihiro rise up and become Hellverine. So back in Washington, D.C., we can see General Harms and Logan walking deep below the Pentagon, on their way to get an update about these destroyers from Dr. Spivey. But Dr. Spivey tells them their blood has shifted considerably since the Hellfire infusion. Their blood has more in common with jet fuel than plasma. Their skin has grown leathery and their organs have all blackened. We can see Logan telling them this is the grave robber's version of Weapon X, that they're doing the same thing that was done to him. But Dr. Spivey and General Harms doesn't really see them as people anymore, and they said they're destroyers. They think of them as, a tank or a fighter jet. And Logan says, "Whatever helps you sleep at night," before spitting on General Harms' shoe. He tells him the only reason he's here is not for his destroyers, that he's only here because of his son, and the destroyers can lead him to it. And General Arms offers to send some men to accompany him, but Logan says he hunts alone. But General Harms and Dr. Spivey are still going to track him, because as we can see, they have hellhounds, and even though hellhounds aren't known for their good-natured obedience, General Harms says he'll keep him on the leash. As he reaches the foot that Wolverine spit on through the cage, he tells the hellhounds, "Take in Wolverine's scent and flavor, and maybe later, when he's no longer of use, you can relish in his blood too." As we see, a Lieutenant Colonel Leon Townsend is alone, sitting in a wheelchair, reminiscing of the good old times. But it doesn't really feel like it, even though everything is gray right now. The memories of his fellow soldiers still burn bright in his head. He shouldn't be alive, and they shouldn't be dead. He feels like he's existing somewhere in between, a shadowland. His heart is full of worms, and his guts are choked with grave dirt. Keeps the TV on to distract him from himself. He hasn't been able to concentrate, his thoughts constantly sliding back into the mud of his grief. Until now, where we see on the news is the Pentagon attack with the destroyers, and Lieutenant Colonel Townsend is shocked to see it and says, "Oh my God, what have they done to you?" We go back to Akihiro in a cabin in the woods near Chesapeake Bay, and in so many ways, Akihiro isn't himself. Not quite alive and not quite dead. No longer Fang, but not fully Bagragul either. His memories are hiding behind locked doors. He still can't form words in his mouth or mind, but he can feel. And he feels pain. And he feels confusion at the two-ness that defies him. For now, he hides, and he heals. And he waits to be called to a fight, as we can see him flame it on. And we can see he doesn't have to wait long. He targets evil the way a dog scents a hunt. It's a combination of proximity and extremity that sends him into action. A man aboard a city bus unzipped his jacket to reveal enough C4 to flatten a block. He demanded to be driven to the White House, but he didn't make it far. As we can see, Hellverine plows straight through the bus and gets this guy because the Hellverine was hungry, hungry for any and every evil, eager to share his burning punishment. As we cut to the Arlington Cemetery in the pouring down rain, where the 5 soldiers were dug up originally, we can see the Madam Secretary there talking with General Harms. And she's basically telling him that they need to get this under wraps, or else she's going to pin this whole thing on General Harms. And him telling her, this is something we've both done. But she reminds him, I gave you a second chance after that mess you got into overseas. If not for me, you'd be tried in The Hague. Fix this, or there will be hell to pay. So we cut to one of the destroyer's wife crying over his memorial in her house. When there's a commotion downstairs, she goes down to see her husband alive again and is one of the destroyers holding their daughter, as her daughter pleads for help. And after seeing her husband alive and him seeing her, they're both kind of confused, and he ends up letting go of his daughter. And they try to escape, and he takes a step toward him, saying, "Mine," before Logan comes in and slices his head off and says, "I don't think so, bud," and tells the wife and daughter to get out of there, as we see him escaping out to where General Harm's men wait with the Hellhound. And the screams from the wife's surprise of the Hellhounds was just enough to turn the tides in the battle against the Destroyer, as he shoots spikes from his body and incinerates Logan completely. As we cut back to outside, we can see what Wolverine didn't understand then is that the soldier named Peter Marmon didn't want to hurt his family. He had a photo of them inside his helmet. They were the first thing he thought of when he woke up and the last thing he thought of when he fell asleep. He just wanted them back. He wanted his life back, as we can see that General Harm's soldiers couldn't contain the Hellhound as it charges toward the wife and daughter, and that the other 2 destroyers had to step in and destroy the Hellhound, because what used to be couldn't be any longer, and the destroyers were beginning to understand who was at blame for this. And later, after Logan heals, he walks out of the burning building to find the wife and daughter surrounded by bodies in the street. He walks up to them and asks them what happened. And all she says is, "I think they just declared war on our country." And just as the destroyers were awakening, slowly, so was Akihiro, as we can see him laying in a field. Dead neurons were sparking again. Synaptic connections were being repaired. He knew his name, even if most of his memories were only half seen, as if a glimpse through a thick fog. Over the past day alone, he had disposed of an assassin, incinerated a nest of vampires, and taken off the road a semi-truck with a trailer full of bodies on hooks. He only wanted to rest, to recover, but there was more work to do, and something ignited inside him. The Hellverine could sense the destroyers as they approached Washington, D.C. in battle formation. We can see the story is to be continued. And this story starts out with General Harms going through his past days as a soldier. And General Harms was not always this way. He used to wear his ugliness on the inside. He was the commander of a shadow unit. They waged the wars that took place outside the media's gaze. What they did was not only unaccountable, but unimaginable. in Asia, in South America, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe. He was said, in some circles, to put the red in the red, white, and blue. On one mission, he learned that the families of enemy fighters were held up in an ancient church. They had hung a white flag of surrender in their entry. He tore it down, and then he tore them up. With no regard for their helplessness or for the sacredness of the holy site, there was a holy relic on the altar, as there are in so many churches. It was the skull of a demon slain by a saint. And as we see him pick it up, someone shoots him in the eye. The bloodshed awakened something ancient and foul. It whispered in his ear, so long as he would continue to carry out sacrifices in Hell's name, Harms would live. He would be loyal to Hell first and the US second. So he enlisted. He experienced a resurrection, as we see the demon skull bringing him back to life. And just outside DC, we see Logan standing in front of a burning house with the family of one of the destroyers that he had just killed. And as he reassures her that this is for the best, that everything burns, she stops him as he's about to leave and offers him a ride, giving him her late husband's motorcycle as we see him zoom away before the fire department shows up. And back at General Harm's office at the Pentagon, we can see him sitting in a dark room across from the skull that had resurrected him. And for what happened at the church, he was supposed to face a war tribunal. But the Secretary of State gave him a second chance. Project Hellfire needed a new director. If he could revive the program and get her some results fast, then he might keep his standing and his pension. If he couldn't get his destroyers in line, he was finished. So he would solve this problem by fighting Hellfire with Hellfire, as we can see him take off his hat and revealing his demon horns just before he gets a call of Dr. Spivey telling him that he's needed in the lab right away. Back at the lab, we see Lieutenant Townsend holding Dr. Spivey at gunpoint. And as General Harms walks in with his hands up, Lieutenant Townsend threatens him, telling him the next time he picks up a phone, he's going to be calling the reporters, or they could help him. And General Harms reassures him that help is something that they can certainly offer. And Lieutenant Townsend wants them to make him walk again, so he can go after his fallen comrades that he had seen on the news. But General Harms tells him that they have never tested on a living subject. But he says he doesn't care, that he'll do it, he offers, because he's their commanding officer and he can get them in line. And they need him just as much as he needed them. And with that, General Harms tells him, "Welcome to Project Hellfire." As we see the Hellverine riding through the streets on his motorcycle. And Akihiro had come from darkness, and now he was consumed by light, the blazing light of hell itself. There was Akihiro, and there was Bagragul, and together they were the Hellverine. With every passing hour, he was better aware of his rebirth and what he had become. He gripped the handlebars, but he didn't control their direction. Not yet. Maybe never. He felt like he was wandering through a big, black house, trying to find his way out. He was driven to live, but the Hellverine was driven only to punish. The destroyers were out there, and he, would find them. But until they made their next move, Hellverine's sense of them remained diffuse. So he found a high vantage point where he could wait, like an antenna tuned into the frequency of evil, as we see him climbing to the top of the Washington Monument. And here, he waits, idling. As we see General Harms meeting up with the Madam Secretary. She tells him that she silenced the media for now, but they really need to get the destroyers in line. Otherwise, she'll be handing in her resignation, and he'll probably disappear into the bowels of some federal prison. And just as he's reassuring her that they have a new development underway, that the destroyer's former squad leader has joined them, they're interrupted by someone saying dead, as the remaining two destroyers crash down saying dead is better. We can see the Madam Secretary and General Harms getting in the car trying to run as one of the destroyers jumps on the car as it tries to escape. General Harms is actually able to shake it off, but doesn't get too far as the other destroyer attaches chains to the car, preventing it from leaving. And that gives the other destroyer just enough time to get up to the car and bite a huge chunk out of the Madam Secretary's face. And Harms, seeing this, tries to run, but is stopped by the chains of the destroyer. Violence, pain, horror, fear, they give off a kind of dark frequency that the Hellverine was attuned to, as we can see the Hellverine roaring in and saving General Harms from the destroyer. His engine shook the air and sounded like a mouthful of screams and grinding scythes. The destroyer could not outrun or outmatch, as we can see one of the destroyers charge at him. He grabs her by the face and rips her mouth open, breaking off her jaw. In the chest of every destroyer was a power cell fueled by hellfire. This was their beginning and their end, as we see Hellverine plunge the chest of the destroyer, blowing it up. As we see General Harms go into the trunk of the car, and among the many weapons Dr. Spivey had forged for Harms, there was a rifle loaded with holy water ammo. He didn't know if it would work, but the last of the destroyers was on the move, and the Hellverine was about to give chase. So he had to act fast, and he chose to shoot the Hellverine. And the high-pitched scream that the Hellverine unleashed made dogs bark and children cry in their sleep up to 50 miles away. Someone else heard it. Someone who had been sniffing the air, tracking the smell of sulfur. Wolverine. As we can see the Hellverine crashing through the city after being shot. But before Logan was the son he had lost, and seemingly in the danger of losing again. As Akihiro crashes to the ground off his motorcycle, Logan runs up to him, saying, "Akihiro, Akihiro." But at Logan's touch, something sparked inside of Dakin, the demon Bagra Ghul. Here was its original host and source of power. It wanted to plug back into Logan, and he allowed it. Like a father wishing he could swallow the fever of his child, wanting to make their pain his own. But instead of helping Akihiro, he doomed him. For the only thing keeping his son alive was the fuel of the demon. As we can see, Logan completing the transfer and Akihiro's body laying there lifeless. The story is to be continued. So we start off with Dr. Spivey in her lab at the Pentangle, the home of the Project Hellfire. And sometimes death calls to us, when our bodies and minds are sick or injured, when the world proves itself too cruel to abide. To curl up in a ball and die would be easier. Some say to survive all the ugliness, courage is required. But curiosity is a better word. What will your life look like now, you must ask? Now that this pain has made everything different, as we see Lieutenant Townsend stepping out, fused with the Hellfire power. Dr. Spivey asks him how he feels, and he tells her he's already lost his fire squad once. He won't stand by and let it happen again. As we cut back to Logan holding his son's lifeless body. Because without the demon Bagra Ghul, Akihiro could not survive, his body succumbing to decay. Wolverine was once again a reluctant host to the demon. Logan had allowed this transfer of possession because he wanted to take on his boy's pain, like a father wishing he could swallow a fever. He had failed Dakin in so many ways before. For a moment, he thought it might be better for his son to die than to live with this curse. But with the demonic energy of Bagra Ghul circulating through him, he saw and felt and knew things that did not belong to him, and understood that something had shifted. The demon hadn't been tamed, but it had been altered by its hybridization with Wolverine. The compulsion was still there, to cut, to hack, to kill, 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 but it was reserved for those who were trafficked in evil, in a way not unlike what Logan himself had struggled with his whole life. Wolverine knew how hard it was to cage a beast inside, and it seemed Bagra Ghul took this lesson to heart. It was still a curse, but it was a curse Akihiro could live with. As we see Wolverine transferring Bagra Ghul back into his son Dakin. Then we cut to General Harms finally showing back up to the lab, holding Madam's secretary, where he's asking Dr. Spivey to save her. And Dr. Spivey telling him that Madam's secretary is no soldier. But Harms tells her that we're going to channel the power of hell right into the leadership of this country, and that Project Hellfire is so much more than to dominate the battlefield. As we cut back to a diner, we can see Akihiro sitting with Logan and eating a ton of food, saying he doesn't know if he'll ever stop eating, like there's a hole inside of him. But Logan tells him that after he's done eating, we should get the hell out of here. But Akihiro tells him that he needs to see things through, especially now that he knows the story behind the soldiers. He can't just walk away. And he says that honestly, he's a little disappointed that Logan doesn't feel the same way. And Logan tells him that maybe he's just being selfish here, but if the US government captures Akihiro, that they'll keep him and experiment on him and he'll be the next Weapon X. But he reassures Logan that Hellverine was Logan's problem before, but it's his problem now. And now he feels more in control now that they have an understanding of what they are. And as Akihiro pops out his claws, he notices that they changed. He's not pretending to be Logan anymore. And Logan agrees to help him bring all this to an end. As they get on their motorcycles, Akihiro says, "Let's ride, but this time you follow my lead. I can sense the destroyers out there. Their numbers are growing again. But there's something worse, someone worse, behind their fire team." We go to the Nationals Park in DC, where we see one of the destroyers at a baseball park. And it was Townsend's job to know his soldiers. And he knew that Corporal Jamie Doden lived and breathed baseball. He packed a ball with him everywhere, even into the hairiest battlefield. He called it his lucky charm. A homer he caught barehanded at a Nationals game. He loved the slow poetry of the game more than anything, and he would fall asleep listening to old broadcasts. If he was scared, this is where he would go, as we see Lieutenant Townsend showing up, ordering the destroyer to stand down, saying, "This is your CEO talking, and that's an order." As we can see the destroyer pleading out as he walks closer to Townsend, putting his head up to his gun, saying, "Please." The lieutenant just grabs him and says, "Come here. We're going to be okay, long as we have each other." As we cut back to General Harms, not everything had gone according to plan, but chaos is its own weapon. General Harms listened to the whispers that came off the demon skull, the greedy, dark whispers that told him what to do next, as we see him putting on the demon skull before going downstairs to meet Dr. Spivey. As he asks her if the Madam Secretary is ready, she tells him yes, but she's not sure this is a great idea, that she thought that they were going to be finding new ways to protect their country. But as General Harms just tosses Dr. Spivey to the side, he says, "Hell is a kingdom. America, like the rest of the world, falls under its reign." Project Hellfire had been formed to harness the power and technology of the underworld. But demonic forces are unstable and predatory by their very nature. Once Hell got a taste of power, it wanted more. It wanted all. If a demon could possess a body, then why not a country? As we see General Harms and the Madam Secretary, who awakened from Hellfire, driving off in their car, and Hellverine and Logan catching up and slicing the tires, causing the car to flip over. Hellverine had sensed a greater evil steering the destroyers, an evil that would focus its attention on the quiet power hidden in the marbled walls. Laws would lead to strife within the country, and declarations would lead to war without, as we see Logan getting the Madam Secretary with his claws. And as he zooms away with her on his claws, he says, "Maybe I'd feel bad about this, except you're already dead," before putting her head into the tires of his bike and her head exploding. Then General Harms emerges from the wreckage, screaming at Hellverine, "Remember your training, Bagargul? Just like the military, Hell has a hierarchy. We serve Mephisto. Hellfire is our banner and our arsenal." Then he shoots at Hellverine, causing him to crash. And as Akihiro's getting up, we can see Logan caught back up, saying, "I'm here, Akihiro, and I'm following your lead." We can also see that Lieutenant Townsend also shows up. And General Harms says, "Just in time. We'll move forward with the combined arms tactics," but he's cut off by the chains of the other destroyer wrapping around his body. As Lieutenant Townsend says, "Like hell we," before blasting General Harms with hellfire, causing the demon skull to fall off his head. Hellverine crushes it. And Logan says, "I'd say this qualifies as a dishonorable discharge." And Hellverine spits out hellfire, incinerating General Harms. We cut to later at Project Hellfire HQ, where Logan's telling Akihiro that they can't just torch the place and walk away because the Pentagon's upstairs. But they got other ways of closing places like this down. And Akihiro tells him no. And Logan says, "No? What the hell do you mean, no?" And Akihiro tells him that they can't guarantee that Project Hellfire won't be resurrected again, but they can guarantee that the right people will be in charge of it. Looking at Lieutenant Townsend and the other destroyer, and Dr. Spivey, he says, "The people that understand the dangerous potential all too well." As Lieutenant Townsend tells him, "You don't have to draft me, Akihiro. I enlist." And as Logan and Akihiro ride away on their motorcycles, Logan tells Akihiro that he'll never be done worrying about him, but he is proud of him, that he made something good out of something ugly, and asks him what's next. And Akihiro tells him that's something that he needs to figure out on his own before turning into the Hellverine, telling Logan, I'll catch you down the road. And it says the Hellverine will return. That will do it for the story of Hellverine and the Destroyers. You can see some of the art in the end of the book. Wolverine, Deadpool team up. Ooh, Wolverine deep cut, Wolverine #1, and draw comics. The art of storytelling. So, this has been the story of Hellverine, and thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll be back with the next one. Till then, have a good one.